tracking your blood sugar, understanding your personal physiology, what affects your blood sugar, what affects your sleep quality, your sleep length, your spikes and falls of blood sugar throughout the day. All of these things are super, super important to you becoming the best version of yourself. Because I believe that understanding your body is the key to trusting it. Hello, my lovely friends, and welcome to today's episode of What We Tell Our Daughters. Today, we're talking about blood sugar control. So, the last few episodes, we've talked about life, we've talked about travel, we've talked about motherhood and relationships, and now we're going to start talking a little bit more about science. So, this is something that I am really passionate about, and I want to share this information with you because I think this is something that's so important for all of our health. And it's often overlooked when we're thinking about the levers we can pull that are going to make the most difference for our bodies. So, I think there's a lot of talk when you see a functional medicine practitioner or you're starting to think about changing your life and shifting things for the better. We hear about these lifestyle changes that we need to make, and we hear we should really prioritize sleep and we should move and we should eat balanced meals and meditate. And, there's all of these things we can do lifestyle wise that have a big impact on our health. But I think it's really hard to follow through, or at least for me, it's really hard to follow through when I don't understand the true whys or what's really happening in my body that's making those differences. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about blood sugar control and why we should care about it. Because I think we hear blood sugar control or we hear insulin or a blood glucose monitor and we think diabetes. Well, I want to shift the way you think about that to optimization. Instead of thinking about this as a disease state or something that we do when we're sick or when we're on that path, we want to think about it as a tool for understanding, a way to get deeper into what works well for our body, what helps us become the best version of ourselves and feel alive and amazing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those relationships today between blood sugar control and hormones and just how you feel every day and sleep. But I want to share with you an experiment I did on myself for the past 2 weeks where I wore a continuous glucose monitor and I also tracked my sleep with my Aura ring that I wear all the time. And I also looked at what was the relationship between my sleep quality, my blood sugar control, in addition to just how different foods were affecting my blood sugar, but at a deeper level, how my sleep affected my blood sugar, and then also how that played into the choices I made in a day. So, a little spoiler alert, I noticed when I sleep less, when I have less quality sleep, and for context, right now, I have pretty terrible quality sleep. My daughter is teething molars, and the last 2 weeks were pretty brutal. So, this was a very interesting time to do this test because I'm getting less sleep probably than I have in the last 6 months in general, and really poor quality sleep. I've been waking up a lot. But what I've noticed is when I sleep less, especially deep sleep, when I have less deep sleep, I have poorer blood sugar control the next day. So, my average blood sugar throughout the day is higher. And I also tend to make poorer food decisions. So, a really important piece of the puzzle when you're doing this type of test is actually tracking what you're eating. For me, it's not practical to put everything into an app and track it that way. I just take a picture of my food so I can go back and kind of compare, okay, here's what happened on this day. And this is really good insight because it becomes kind of a self feeding cycle where you don't sleep very well. So, you maybe naturally have poor blood sugar control. I'm actually going to share my screen to explain this so we can talk a little bit about the studies that back this up. There's so many studies they've done, but there's really, really good research. So, in this study, they looked at a bunch of different things, and I'll link all of these studies in the notes for today. But one of the big takeaways here is partial sleep deprivation. So, that's like what I'm currently experiencing continuous state of under rest shows that when they do a glucose tolerance test after 5 days of this lesser amount of sleep. So in this situation, it was 6 nights of 4 hours in bed, right? So you're only actually sleeping for, maybe 4 hours, probably even less. And it showed that their average glucose clearance was 40% lower than the study group that didn't have this impaired sleep. So, what that says is that when we don't sleep enough, we don't clear glucose out of our body as fast. There's lots of different types of studies that show this in different ways. Here's another one we can look at that just says this is sleepfoundation.org, right? Just a general sleep research. But even partial sleep deprivation over one night increases insulin resistance. So we can see that the body is maybe pumping out more insulin. Your insulin might even be higher, but your blood sugar control is not as good. I realize now that I might need to backtrack a little and explain the relationship between insulin and blood sugar. So, insulin, when you eat sugar, when you eat a carbohydrate, or really you eat anything, your body releases insulin. And insulin is a hormone that is meant to pull sugar out of the bloodstream and put it into cells so that you can use that for energy. This is how things work when it's happening in a healthy body, right? We eat something, our body releases insulin, it pulls that sugar out of the bloodstream into the cell, and the cell's like, great, now I have fuel, I can go about my daily activities. What happens when we have a state where we're maybe eating excess carbohydrate or excess sugar is the body is pumping out extra insulin because it realizes there's an influx of sugar coming in. We're going to need a little bit more to get all of this out of the bloodstream. And so the body pumps out the pancreas pumps out extra insulin. And over time, when there's that state of excess insulin, the body starts to become what we say insulin resistant. We call it insulin resistance, where you're making insulin, you're pumping it out, but the cells aren't responding to it in the same way because they've been living in that environment where there's insulin around for so often. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. They're like, yeah, sure, okay. We don't really need to deal with this message as much. And so the body pumps out more insulin and more insulin to try to push it through. For a little while, that works, and you do still have good blood sugar control. And so you may not see when you go get your blood sugar tested, or if you have ever heard of what we call an HbA1c, that's where we're looking at um, basically what blood sugar control looks like over about 3 months. If you ever had those tests done, those can look completely fine, but your body's actually starting to be insulin resistant. And so a better test is to actually look at insulin in the morning in a fasted state and see where your insulin is at. For optimal health, we would like that to be less than 8. A fasting insulin less than 8 means that your body is still in a really good state. It's still responding to insulin well. Now, what this article is saying is that when you're having a lot of sleep deprivation, we have increased insulin resistance. So that means our body is not responding to insulin as well. That means we have elevated blood sugar levels, usually. And so we actually have seen that lack of sleep is a contributing factor to people developing prediabetes or diabetes. And so this is a really important piece of the puzzle. There's also a host of other reasons why sleep is so important for blood sugar control. And this goes deep into many different pathways. One, here we can see cortisol is increased by sleep deprivation. So cortisol is our stress hormone. When we don't sleep enough, our cortisol goes up and our blood sugar control is worse. And this is exactly what I saw when I wore the continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks. I saw that the nights I didn't get as much sleep, my blood sugar in the morning, fasting blood sugar was higher. In general, throughout the day, my blood sugar was higher. Sometimes on days where I ate the same exact thing as a day where I got a little bit more sleep. Now, another interesting thing to note here is that I did notice when I started to look at those days of photos of what I was eating, that on days when I slept less the night before, I tended to eat a lot more carbohydrates the next day because in that sleep impaired state, your decision making is also impaired. And all you really want is just to feel good, feel a little bit better. And so the body craves carbohydrates because that's what carbs do. They release that little brain messages that say, everything is good. We're all going to be fine. Now, if it was just a single day, wouldn't be the worst thing for you as long as your blood sugar was maintaining and you were having enough days throughout the week where you were having more balanced meals. One day is not going to make or break. But what often happens then is that that higher level of glucose throughout the day, the higher number of carbs throughout the day, often leads to eating before bed because I have these rise and fall blood sugar all day long. And so when it comes to be bedtime, my body hasn't had a consistent blood sugar maintenance all day long. And so it's like, oh, we're still hungry. We're hungry because now our blood sugar's crashing because we had so much sugar all day, up and down, up and down. So that leads to snacking before bed or eating more carbs before bed, which then impairs sleep quality even more. So this is like a feedback cycle where we also know that when we eat close to bedtime, especially when we eat carbohydrates close to bedtime, we have less deep sleep. We get the majority of our deep sleep in the first half of our night of sleep, usually in the first few hours of your sleep. And so if your body's doing really hard work to digest, and it's not able to go into that full deep sleep cycle in the first part of your sleep, then you're right back where you started the next day with poor sleep quality, less deep sleep, less ability to control your blood sugar internally, less ability to control your blood sugar externally by making poor food decisions, etc. So this is reason number one why I think that tracking your blood sugar over the course of a few weeks, this isn't something you have to do forever, can be really, really insightful. And I love this tool if you're feeling not quite like yourself. If you feel like your moods are off, or you started having acne out of nowhere, or you feel like your sleep quality is suffering out of nowhere, this is a really helpful tool to start to help you understand your own body, because there's another piece to this puzzle, which is that not everyone responds to foods in the same way. What spikes my blood sugar may not spike my husband's blood sugar or my daughter's blood sugar. So this is a very personalized process, and you can start to see which foods are working the best for you and which ones don't. So if you do need a late night snack because you're a mom and you forgot to eat all day and finally the kids are asleep and you realize, okay, I should probably actually eat a meal now, okay, what's actually the most balanced meal for my body that's not going to spike my blood sugar before bed, that's going to be slowly absorbed and have kind of the least effect, hopefully, on my sleep quality. And so those are kind of the lines that we can start to draw. So I hope this conversation is helping you understand why insulin and why blood sugar are important, and why understanding it for your body is really important. Now, there is something else that plays into this, and that is our hormones. So, if you know me, you know that I am super passionate about our hormone cycles, about periods, about menstruation, about just how our female body works, because it is just a miraculous being, and I don't think we give it enough credit. But on that same note, it's very sensitive and it changes quickly in response to its environment. It's very normal for your periods to not be the same every month, actually. That's probably more normal than having the exact same period every month, or length of your cycle, sorry. And the reason for that is your body is responding to its environment at every step along the way. And so if things are a little bit different each month, and you notice your life is a little different each month, that's totally normal. That's your body being resilient and responsive to what's happening in your daily life. What's not normal is excessive pain, excessive bleeding, nausea, excessive fatigue that takes you out for 3 days, 4 days, a week, whatever it may be. Those things are not normal. And that's another time where doing something like this kind of blood sugar monitoring, sleep monitoring can be really insightful to start to figure out what are the biggest levers for me to pull in my life. Because we can't do everything. Even if we want to do everything, it's just not practical. I really encourage the women I work with not to do everything. I think it leads to burnout. I think it's an impractical expectation we set for ourselves. And we have to have more positive self talk and the ability to prioritize, because your worth is not tied to how much you get done, but our society has made things that way. And so it's really important for us to be able to pull out for our bodies, for our health, for our life and our joy, what are the biggest needle movers for me? And so in doing this study for the last few weeks, I can actually see one of my biggest needle movers is sleep. If I get enough sleep, I make better choices. I am a generally happier person. My blood sugar control is better. I have less small little types of skin breakouts. And this is not really that surprising, right? We know that having enough sleep is so important for people's health, but I think it's something that we don't always prioritize. And so when you have hard data that tells you this and you can see it laid out right in front of you, it becomes easier, at least for me, to say, okay, 10 p.m., I'm turning off the lights, I'm done working, I'm going to go read for 20 minutes, and I'm actually going to sleep instead of pushing it till midnight, 12:30, talking to my husband, whatever it may be. I'm going to be a better mom, a better partner, a better person at work, just a generally happier person if I take the time to prioritize my sleep. And that might be true for you, or maybe it won't be. Maybe you actually see that there are bigger needle movers for you, like getting exercise during the day. Maybe that's more important for you than getting sleep. Or maybe it's taking time to meditate in the morning. We can also track how these habits change our physiology when we do this kind of whole body measurement. So this leads me to back to hormones, to our female sex hormones and testosterone. And the other piece of this puzzle is that we know that when our insulin levels are higher, that has an effect on our sex hormones. So I'm going to share my screen again. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, if you're listening, that's fine. You can take a look at these studies that I will link in the notes. This one is really interesting. So this one is titled The Contribution of Hyperinsulinemia to the Hyperandrogenism of Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. So polycystic ovarian syndrome is a pretty common now endocrine disorder in women, and it's extremely underdiagnosed. So if you have a lot of pain with periods or very irregular cycles that last 35, 40, 50, maybe you don't even have a period for multiple months and then it comes and it's extremely painful. Maybe you've had that deep piercing pain of an ovarian cyst rupturing. I've had that. It's not fun. I wish that on no one. All of these things can be a sign of PCOS. They're not always like I don't have PCOS, but I have had an ovarian cyst rupture. So they don't always go hand in hand. But PCOS, one thing that we know is connected to it is elevated insulin levels. And so one thing we can do is start to really control blood sugar and really control what we're eating when someone has PCOS. But what this study shows, I'm going to scroll down on the page because I highlighted an important part, which is insulin directly inhibits liver production of sex hormone binding globulin. Sex hormone binding globulin binds to our sex hormones and makes them unavailable in a free environment. So when it inhibits the production, that means we have more sex hormone floating around. That means we have more free and available, especially in the case of PCOS, androgens, which are your testosterone and your DHEA. So, thus, as the study says, excessive insulin causes both the overproduction of testosterone and decreased sex hormone binding globulin, both of which kind of contribute to that increased testosterone state in PCOS. We also can see increased estrogen levels with elevated insulin because that same process where we have lowered sex hormone binding globulin, more available hormone. So if you're having trouble losing weight or you're really bloated or you have a lot of weight or puffiness around the belly, that can sometimes be a sign of actually excess insulin or excess testosterone in women. And that can be linked back to insulin levels and our blood sugar control. So all of that is to say, tracking your blood sugar, understanding your personal physiology, what affects your blood sugar, what affects your sleep quality, your sleep length, um, your spikes and falls of blood sugar throughout the day. All of these things are super, super important to you becoming the best version of yourself. Because I believe that understanding your body is the key to trusting it. And when we trust our body, there are so many things that happen. I think so many people have so much fear around aging, around how their bodies work, around Just if something is going wrong, if something is going right, why do I feel this way? The number of women that have come to me who have irregular periods and are just beyond frustrated, feeling like they can't trust their body because their body puts them what feels like through hell every single month is so disheartening to me because it should be in a perfect world. I hope that a menstrual cycle is something that you can harness and use to make you better and stronger and really use these different parts of your cycle to drive you forward. But when we don't trust our body, when we don't trust that it's there to help us instead of hurt us, then we don't have the ability to use any of that magic that's waiting on the other side of that door. And so this is one of the keys to that puzzle of, or the keys to the door of really understanding what are the needle movers for me and what are the most important things that I can do for my health to make me a happier, healthier, more rested, better person. So this is something that I absolutely adore. I'm in the beginning stages of researching this on myself and a few of my clients. If you're interested in being a test subject, please let me know. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that more in a if you're interested in becoming an empowered woman who truly understands your body and you want to do some of this research with me, I would love to hear from you because this is kind of the next evolution I see in the women's health space. We've done research on insulin, we've done research on glucose, we've done research on sleep, we've done research on menstrual cycles, but we haven't really put the whole picture together yet for each individual. And that's what I am hoping to do and create. So this was a bit more of a sciencey episode. If you liked it, if you have questions, please let me know. I would love to hear about them. If you have more questions and you want to dive in deeper to some of the topics I kind of brushed over today, also let me know because this is just scratching the surface. This is just the very beginning. And we're going to have a lot more conversations like this, but I thought this was a good place to start and hopefully to get your brain thinking about your life and what's working for you and maybe what needs to shift and how you're going to start doing that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and I'll see you in the next one.